What's up, YouTube? You can call me Jan, or you can call me Cerberus, whichever one you look like. I'm your just run-of-the-mill low elo streamer, but I like to give off some kind of my viewpoints on the meta changes for the subsequent future of League. I call this a low elo review because my opinion is of the patches at my level of gameplay, so I'm nothing like the upper echelon of League. So I'm not casual or LS or anything like that, but you can check out what I want to say about this in my own views, and maybe it's a different point of view. So let's get into it. So this is patch 15.18 with League of Legends. 25.17 or 15.17 last patch did offer some viewpoints on what the Riot team wants to do with the future of League going into Worlds, and I titled that more of a meta shift for Worlds. So it really changes what we have seen being the meta, with kind of bruiser champions taking over, and just ADCs not being able to play the game at most gameplay, where they're just getting dived, they're just getting run down, and only the best of the best ADCs can really survive right now without their support. So right now I see a lot of changes to the big champions that are kind of relevant right now. So I see a lot more of the two-shot champions getting nerfed. The main ADCs that have been able to survive, with Yunara being one of them. And we've had a couple of good buffs to other ADCs that haven't been given enough love, with Ashe being buffed right now. So let's just get into this, and we'll kind of give our own opinions on what's going on. So starting off with Amumu, I think Amumu support has been kind of a low ball for a lot of the patches in previous times, and I think right now with their buff to his Q cooldown at higher levels, with it being 16 at the beginning and then going into 10 to the subsequent levels, and its mana cost going down from 45 to 65 to just a flat 50, I think the overall Amumu buffs for Amumu all around, so maybe for jungle, it is pretty good, but it gives a lot more agency to Amumu in the support role, where he can throw out bandage toss a lot more late game, which we all know as an Amumu jungle. You are very, very strong early game with the bandage tosses going into fights or ganks. So Amumu support can stay pretty healthy with their mana right now, and they don't have to worry about using up a lot of mana aside from their W going into fights. Moving on to Ashe. Ashe has been pretty lackluster, I would say, aside from those Ashe mids that you see going just cool down on their ults and just throwing out ult charges all the time. Ashe as a ADC hasn't been played a lot as I've seen it, and she has been very lackluster with her damage. So I think the AD growth increase to 3.45 from 295 is very good, because it gives her a lot more damage throughout the game, and we might see a lot more skirmishes in the bot lane with Ashe, with her passive being pretty strong, coupled with Braum or Maokai or any lockdown supports. You can see a lot more of Ashe kiting through that, instead of kind of just staying in the backline, trying to throw her W, trying to get a Q proc on some people. So I think this is really good for her overall. Moving on to Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia, I think in my elo, is not played enough. I think she is a very good champion for carrying the game late game, and having her damage kind of just taper up throughout the game. The one problem with Cassiopeia at the low elo is that she uses a lot of mana. Unless you start with a Tear of the Goddess first, she is gonna lose up all her mana using her E and her Qs. So right now with this buff, I think it's really good. Her E poison damage is also getting a slight buff. I think it's only a 12 increase at um late levels, but I think this is really good because it'll give her a lot more survivability with her mana. So she doesn't have to back as often. She doesn't have to waste as much gold on mana items. So this is a good buff to her beginning stages. So you can maybe look at the tier of the goddess maybe as a start, and then you can just forget about it and just start building uh, AP on the long run, right? So moving on from that, we get Garen. I don't think this Garen buff is needed. This Garen buff looks very scary to me as a top laner. His EAD ratio should never be buffed. I think he's always really strong with the movement speed items whenever he stacks them, or if he goes Stridebreaker into Ghost, into Dead Man's Plate. It's just impossible to kill a Garen when he's Eing. He just E's, runs at you with his E, runs out, gets his W, gets his Q, he's out. So if you're increasing the AD ratio while he's spinning, it's just going to destroy top lane as overall. He is really not a meta pick that I see for pro play, so I don't think this buff is needed overall. I think he's strong as he is. Hui, I haven't seen a Hui buff in a while, so this is kind of unexpected. I think Hui is very much a pro play champion, so I was expecting to see this for pro play and not overall for a low elo. You know, Hui is not really played that much. The Huis that I do see are pretty good at them, so I think this will give Hui a lot more, impact in the lower elos. Starting off with his AP ratio, sorry. His passive AP ratio is going up by 5%, which is a lot, I would say. So, a lot more of a damage buff to him overall, with his WQ movement speed increase from 20 to 30 to 30 to 40, which is a lot, plus a 1% increase to his 100 AP gain. His movement speed with his WQ is pretty strong to get out of fights or to start a chase. I don't think it does that much damage, so we might see this more of an escape tool for Hui. Looking at his EAP ratio, it goes up by 5%, which is the combos with his E, if I remember correctly, is his eye, the grasp mechanic, and the explosion. So overall, this is really an increase to Hui as a damage dealer. We don't see any changes to his cooldowns, to his lockdown stuns, or anything like that. So I think this is more of Hui needs an AP buff. Really, that's what they saw this as. So we're gonna see a lot of Hui in pro play. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I think a lot of mid laners are gonna play this as like a third pick in the fearless drafts. I think that in low elo, it's going to be seen a lot more. So, the engaged mid laner counters to Hui are going to have a lot more of a rough time because he can just, disengage completely from a fight, or he can just run away a lot faster. So, this is a pretty big buff, one of the bigger buffs that I've seen. Moving on to Jace. I haven't seen a Jace buff in a while. Same as Cassiopeia. I think he is a pretty standard top laner, mid laner, who doesn't need a buff overall. But I see this more of a, his early levels are a little bit weaker to begin with anyway. So they wanted to give a lot more love to those Jace players. He can really do a lot of damage late game. But nobody expects a Jace to, full in on level 1. So those of you that go Jace level 1 Q, you might see a increase to your rapid attacks and then an increase to your Q long range attacks. I think this is pretty good for Jace. I don't think this is going to change a lot of the play for him. I think this is just going to give him a lot more early burst overall. Moving on to Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz is a very fun champion play. He is a lot of geometry, a lot of high damage if you can get all your combos right. I think the cooldown lowering for his E is pretty good because, overall, your E is used to trap players, to disengage, to make sure you're not getting attacked immediately from that, charging in Talon, Kha'Zix, Rengar. So going down from 14 to 12 to 12 to 10 is pretty good. I think this is going to see a lot more Vel'Koz bot lane as a support, with his ult being also increased from 450 to 800 to 450 to 925. That is pretty big. That base damage is kind of crazy. So watch out for Vel'Koz, full shotting a high level top laner with his ult, because his ult damage with his passive is crazy. Okay, those are all the buffs. Moving on to champion nerfs. We have Annie, Aurora, Azir, Galio, Kiana, Silas, Talia, Volibear, and Yunara. The Annie nerfs I did not see coming. I think Annie isn't played that much in pro play or in, low elo to high elo ranked. I think this is a really weird nerf with her W base damage going down and her R passive pen is also going down. I think these are very small nerfs to her. Her Q is most of the time what she does a lot of damage with. Her R is going down by 2.5 overall. And it's very weird to see this passive pen being nerfed. I think any R, I think the burst is always the problem and not the subsequent trades with it. So this is very weird. Moving on to Aurora. I love this nerf. Fuck Aurora. Aurora is always the biggest pain in the ass for a top laner or a mid laner because she has long range with her auto attacks. She can disengage very easily with all of her kit. So her passive damage is always the biggest problem because she takes her half of your health just off of 2 cooldowns. So this is a 1.5% decrease to her passive damage and a 0.7 increase per AP per 100 AP. So I think overall this is really good. I think it just kind of levels out overall. So her early trades are going to be a lot rougher for her. Her later trades are going to be a lot better because she stacks AP very easily. So this is very good. Moving on, Azir. I don't like to see Azir nerf. I think when Azir is big, he has a lot of showtime in pro play. When he is nerfed, you never see him. So this is a 0.5 decrease on his attack speed growth, and his WAP ratio goes down by 5%. So I think we are seeing that they don't want Azir to be the biggest mid lane problem. They still want him to be played because this is not a gut to him. This is definitely a subsequent nerf of his ramp up. I think this is good in a sense because I like Azir in pro play. I like to see him a lot. I don't like it when he takes over the meta. I think he is a good, call in for counters when you want to burn down a massive front line of tanks and you have a good team synergy with him. So I think this is good overall. I may have said it. I don't like to see it, but overall, reading through it, it looks good. Galio nerfs. Galio has been strong. He is a little bit of a thorn in mid laner sides and top laner sides whenever he's picked, because he has been running Hollow Radiance every game, and his, just burst damage isn't there, but his subsequent long fight damage is there, and he is very tanky. So I think his passive AP ratio going down is good. So no more bursts from his passive. It's going down by 5%. His Q tick damage, I don't think needs to be nerfed. I think his Q does not do that much damage with the ticks. I think its burst damage does a lot. So I think this is a pretty good gut to his Q. It doesn't last as long, I think. And I think the 8% nerf from a 10% is honestly gutting his Q a lot. So you might see a lot more of Galio just being played as a tank and just running around, ulting fights, keeping the attention on himself. And I think this is going to change him from burst, where he was doing a lot of damage and still being a tank, to just being a tank overall. He might be called in as a answer to those very high AP mid laners, where he can just survive and not take that many trades, and then be a problem in the late game. Kiana. This is really funny because they buffed Kiana in the previous patches, and this is just we did an oopsie here. We're going to lower her base AD, her armor growth, her passive damage. I think this doesn't take her out of the game completely, but, this is really funny because they definitely overbuffed her with the assassin buffs to assassin damage. That's all I'm going to say on this one because I don't really like Kiana. Silas passive monster damage amp goes down from 150% to 130%. This doesn't really change Silas jungle that much. He is still very strong. That's as much as I can say of that. Talia. Volibear, passive attack speed AP ratio 4% per 100 AP to 3% per 100 AP. That's not a lot, honestly. Volibear is still very strong. He might not be the number 1 jungler anymore because of this. It might go down to number 2 or number 3. But he is still a top 3 jungler in my opinion. He heals a lot with his W. His Q always runs you down no matter what. Q flash into somebody, you're going to hit them. His E does a lot of damage and still gives him his shield, so this doesn't do anything to Volibear overall. You're still going to see him in low elo. You're still going to see him in mid elo. You might not see him in high elo as much, but, he's still there. Now, this is the biggest change overall, I think. Lunara, base health goes down to 575. Base AD goes down to 53. Her E movement speed goes down from 50 to 70 to 30 to 50. Her E movement speed duration goes up actually. Actually, no, sorry. Let me rephrase. It stays the same throughout all ranks. Lunara at high elo is impossible to deal with. Lunara in low elo on a just stacking items for attack speed and just waiting for the late game is impossible to deal with. I think this guts her completely. I think this removes her from being the overall answer for a super ramp ADC. And I think this changes how she wants to be played. I think you're going to want to still stack attack speed, but you're going to want to go high damage on her at the same time, because she is not going to get that, lethal tempo just into somebody. She's not going to get that. You need damage on her. Her E does not give you enough movement speed to run away as much. And her duration for her E is going to last very little. So you need to watch out for that. That is for champion buffs and nerfs. Champion adjustments. We have Briar and Alawi. Briar is changing her damage for her Q from AP to magic to AP to physical. I think this has been a very big problem for Briar counters because her Q is magic damage overall, where she stacks AP magic damage, and you can run her Q as an AP damage to kind of get away from the armor stacking players. I think this changing it to physical damage changes a lot because now stacking armor will do something to negate her Q damage when she jumps on you with her Q and does all of your, damage and gets it back. I think this is a good kind of adjustment for her. And they're changing the overall R damage from 150, 250, 350 plus 50% bonus AD and plus 120% AP to just 130% AP. So I think that bonus AD percentage getting removed is really good. And I think the ult range increase on this is kind of crazy. I just noticed that. That is pretty crazy right there. Still going to be a problem overall. You're still going to see those Briars kind of just dominate the game here. Moving on. Alawi. Alawi got nerfed and then got nerfed. And it looks like there is still a nerf coming to her. Her passive no longer spawns tentacles during teleport. I think that is a very funny thing that happens because if you get passive going through teleport and then you land and then you still have to wait that subsequent 8 to 10 seconds for a tentacle spawn, it's kind of annoying, but it's not like game breaking. So I think this is a really funny just kind of revert. W max health damage going from 4% per total AD to 3.5% total AD. It's good. It's really good. It hit her W when the tentacle slams and when she just jumps on you with grasp. It does a lot of damage. I think this is good. I think the E vessel duration going up 3 seconds to 4 seconds doesn't change a lot. She is still really, really strong. System buffs. Bommy's Cinder and Sunfire Cape. Bommy's Emulate monster damage goes up from 50% to 100%, and Sunfire's Emulate to minion and monster damage goes from 50% to 60%. This is really good for tank junglers. Amumu, Volibear, going Skarner, going Maokai. This is really good. Tank top laners who want Sunfire to be played again and don't see it as often because it just doesn't do enough damage to minions. The Orns, the Garens, the Mundos, all of those really like Sunfire on themselves because it gives you a lot of health and it kind of just clears a wave. The other one that you probably can't see here is Mercurial Scimitar. I haven't seen Mercurial Scimitar played in a long time because it just doesn't give enough. Attack damage goes up 40% to 50. Magic resist goes down 40 to 35. But the active movement speed on its active goes up by 0.5 seconds. I don't think this is going to bring the item into the game that much. But, it's a good, lockdown clear with a lot. I think this brings it as a good item to take in lockdown games where you're seeing a lot of stuns being happening and a lot of I need to get a cleanse or I need to get something that helps me cleanse. So you might see this being played in pro play because pro players like to take this with the sash that click it and it negates crowd control. Overall, this is a pretty big patch, but I think it is going to be one of many coming up for War. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for sticking around for this one. This is just a short, buff, nerf, my views on it. Thank you guys so much.